Hallelujah. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be the name of the Lord. We thank you, mighty God. We give you thanks. We give you. Hello, hello, hello. So good to have you join us for this very special edition of the online marriage counseling. And today, the segment is having the privilege of hosting Dr. Tunde Shegun, a long-standing friend of my wife and I, somebody we love and respect dearly for both his person and his principles. He has a very, very strong Christian background, son of a pastor, lived his life. Everybody thought he would be a pastor by the way he led his life, but he has been a great pillar to pastors over the years. And in his medical practice, his expertise has had him work extensively in the areas of fertility, sexuality, and all of that. So, with a good biblical background and scientific, education, he's here to share with us today on sexual intimacy in marriage. Remember, the online marriage counseling OMC, as we have tagged it, is designed in such a way that we treat four pillar subjects, friendship, communication, intimacy, and building a future together. And on these four, in a rotational manner, we bring module upon module to build line upon line, precept upon precept, and so to help you gather materials with which you can scale up what you have. Whatever is bad can be made good. Whatever is good can be made better. And the easiest way for you to review or do a scorecard for any relationship is to look at it from these four angles: friendship, communication, intimacy, and building a future together. Through the lenses of these four factors, you are going to be able to easily detect whatever is wrong. Somebody has asked me, Pastor, why don't you have a subject on finance? And I said, yes, finance is an issue. But if people are friends, if a couple are friends and they have great communication, they will resolve finances. Some other person said there's a great problem with immigrant families. those who have jackpot overseas, why don't you build another subject, for them in particular? And once again, I said, if you have great intimacy, you know how to talk to yourselves, you have good communication, and you have friends, there is no society or culture in the world that would destroy what you have. And in this line, Jesus speaking in Matthew 7 from verse 24 to verse 27, Matthew 7 from verse 24 to 27, he said, whosoever does these sayings of mine, I will liken him unto a wise man that built his house upon the rock. Then he said, the wind came and beat against it, the rains came and beat against it, the storm came and beat against it, but it did not fall. Why? Because it was founded on the rock. Another translation says, because its foundation was made of a rock. But the biggest revelation even in that narrative is this: it is doing something with what you have heard that gives you the security against the vicissitudes of life. Even if the house is built on a rock, it will not be exempted from the rains, from the winds, from the storms, or any other vicissitudes of life. But because you have done something with what you have heard, what you do changes your resistance against what comes at you. So on that note, I want to say to us today, if you are not doing much with what you are hearing during this online marriage counseling, then you are doing your foundation a disservice. God is giving you materials with which you can consolidate, solidify, strengthen, review, revamp, and enable your foundations and the bonding of your relationship to withstand anything that comes against it. But the only thing God can't do, and I can't do, neither any other man of God or medical expert can do, is that we can't do it for you. You got to do it. Please fight for your marriage. Fight for what you have. The only person that stands to rejoice if your marriage fails is the devil, your enemies. And there'll be a lot of people rejoicing if your marriage should succeed. Your spouse will rejoice, you will rejoice, your children will rejoice, your friends will rejoice, your church will rejoice, Christ will rejoice over you. As a matter of fact, in the book of Revelation, it says there's a crown that is set aside for those who overcome. And I pray that as we go through these modular rotational teachings, that you will do something marvelous with what you are hearing. Today, we are going to listen to Dr. Tunde Shegun, like I said, a father of two wonderful graduates, one of them working with us here in Canada. I think he's been married now for 30 years. Yes, to the same woman. I think I should collect a second diary. Let me not go there because he will demand diary of me as well. Okay. But before we bring him up, I've asked Ibidun to set up a little clip, both to tease the teacher and to tease you and I. Let's watch the clip and then I'll bring up Dr. Shegun. Over to you, Ibidun.
To my ever-loving wife, during the last year, I have attempted to make love to you 365 times. I succeeded 36 times. This averages once every 10 days, and the following is a list of reasons why I did not succeed. It's too hot, 15 times. It's too cold, 3 times. I'm too tired, 19 times. It's too late, 16 times. It's too early, 9 times. Pretending to sleep, 35 times. I'm not in the mood, 21 times. Mind my hair, 28 times. Is that all you think about? 83 times.
Okay, Doc. So you see the problems that the men encounter in this particular area. Is that all that is on your mind? I am not in the mood, pretending to be sleeping. Please mind my hair. So Doc, the floor is yours. What should we do to enhance and enrich this aspect of our lives? God bless you. Please help me receive Dr. Tunde Shegun. Hallelujah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pastor Ken. I don't take it for granted that you give me this platform. I've also admired you and Pastor Tino over the years, spent in this area, your heart of wanting to see Christians be the example of, being the example that of marriage, of godly marriage. It's just phenomenal. So I really, really appreciate you guys. Just a slight correction. I do have 3 children, 2 sons and a
Okay.
daughter.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Thank you for that
Yes.
correction.
And yes, this is my 31st year in marriage. Yes. Thank you. Okay, so I know I have limited time and so much to say, but I think to make it easy, I have these slides that I would like them to project so that the viewers can also follow along as I speak to those slides. It makes it easier to follow when you have something you're actually seeing and reading along with. Okay, thank you. So I know this topic had many ways of putting it, but I just put it as intimacy, and we'll look at it from God's perspective. I mean, from the medical perspective as well as the biblical perspective. Next slide, please. I don't know. These slides keep coming and going. Is it just me? Because right now I don't even see the slides again. Okay, so next slide, please. Just click. Yes, so I'll just quickly do some little introduction, talk about some basics, what is sexual dysfunction, what are the stages in human sexual response cycle, and then what are some of the causes and types of sexual dysfunction, both in men and women. And then, of course, the almighty, how often should couples have intercourse? What are these issues about oral sex? What are the medical ramifications, biblical ramifications? And then we'll end with something about sexual abuse, because it's also something that is emerging even in the Christian context. Next slide, please. Okay, by way of introduction, I mean, let's always remember that God is the one that instituted marriage, and He actually wants us to have fulfilling marriages, and these include healthy and fulfilling sexual relationships. Of course, positive examples. Remember Adam and Eve. Bible says in Genesis 4:1 that he knew his wife Eve, so he had sexual intercourse with her, and she conceived. Isaac and Rebecca, when they were in the foreign land, the king looked out of his window and saw, like Genesis 26:8 will say. In KJV, it says they were sporting. Other versions says they were fondling, they were caressing, So those are like healthy relationships. And Jesus in Matthew 19:5-6 talks about, quoting Adam, that the two shall become one. And the oneness is not just in terms of physical, or oneness in terms of I give you my ring and I will exchange rings, but it's also has sexual intimacy in mind. But of course, like we know, love making means slightly different things to both men and women. The man is more about his satisfying his sex drive, being fulfilling his manhood, enhancing his love for his wife, reducing friction in the home. For a woman, it may be just fulfilling her womanhood, satisfying her sex drive as well, amongst other things. But as we know, there are challenges. You can't just have sexual intimacy or healthy and fulfilling sexual relationships that God intended without some challenges. So we'll be examining this and see how we can manage and address them. Next slide, please. So by way of definition, what is sexual dysfunction? And it is not the 2 words, it's the repeated inability. It's repeated, and it's an inability to experience the various stages of the human sexual response cycle after appropriate stimulation. And it's no respect of persons. Older people experience it, younger people experience it, or young people experience it. So next slide, let's look at what is this human sexual response cycle, because you can't talk about something dysfunctional without knowing what is normal. There are two schools of thought which are almost the same. Some recognize it as having 4 stages, while the other recognize it as 5 stages. The first stage talks about arousal, and then you hit a plateau, then the orgasmic phase, and then resolution. The 5 stage model talks about desire, what we also call libido, and then from number 2, it aligns with the 4 stage one, the excitement or arousal, and then the plateau, the orgasm, and then resolution. Next slide, please. Just to expatiate on some of these things. So libido, as we know it, or desire, is that stage where a woman or a man wants to desire sexual intimacy or gratification. And this can last from, a moment to, a long time. The next one, as excitement or arousal, is when this is characterized by the body's initial response to feelings of sexual desire. So there's some arousal, something in you, and this may last from minutes to hours. The third stage, of course, once you are in that mode, you are now hitting a plateau, and that's the highest point of sexual excitement. And this generally lasts between 30 seconds and 3 minutes. And orgasm, of course, this stage is the peak of the plateau stage. And at this point, at which sexual tension is released, and generally lasts for less than a minute. Of course, this is where for a man, we say the man ejaculates, and for a woman, she actually orgasms. And of course, resolution is the duration of which the body then returns to that pre-excitement state, and it varies greatly and generally increases with age. And of course, it also differs between men and women. There are many specific things that happen, in the body when these stages arise, but I just thought I have limited time, so I won't go into all that. So next stage, next slide, please. Just to note that, even though there are 4 or 5 stages, depending on the situation, penetration is not always necessary for such sexual gratification to occur. Couples can stimulate themselves, and orgasm can take place without penetration. And of course, completing stage 1 to 5 is not always necessary for sexual fulfillment. And of course, orgasm may vary in intensity from one person to another and from one sexual encounter to another. So at times you will say, oh, I had great sex. At times, I was just there, So it varies in intensity from one encounter to the other. Next slide, please. So we will begin to, next slide, please. Okay, so some of the common causes. So now we've established you have a human sexual response cycle, from either desire or excitement to or arousal to plateau to orgasm, and then resolution. And we've identified the fact that there is sexual dysfunction which can be along any of those 4 or 5 stages. So what are some of these common causes? Fear. Of course, if it's something that is being stolen, like Proverbs will say, stolen waters are sweet and bread eaten in secret is pleasant, but he doesn't know that their guests are, in hell. But for those who are doing it illegally, there's that fear of being caught. So, of course, that can lead to a dysfunction. Or even in a marital situation, if they are not using appropriate family planning methods, that fear in the woman of getting pregnant can also result in a dysfunction. Of course, guilt is a situation where, there are conflicts in the, choice of sex. So, for example, is it right to have premarital sex? Even if a brother is pressurizing his sister and all that, there's that guilt. And of course, if someone has extramarital affairs, that guilt in itself, when they see their spouse, can also lead to dysfunction. Again, I can't see the slides again. I don't know whether the audience can see the slides. It's disappeared from my screen. Brother Abidu, if you can hear me, are you working on putting back the slides? But I didn't. Okay, let me just go on from my own screen then. Okay, the other reason, common cause, is also anger. I mean, when you are angry, the last thing you want to do is now to engage in sexual intercourse. Anxiety, of course, you can imagine the kind of, at least for those of us in Nigeria, the kind of things that are happening in the country right now, financial issues, issues at work, the pressures can also lead, to dysfunction. And of course, when there are issues between spouses, so relationship difficulties can also lead to there being dysfunction as sexually. Stress, as we know it, related to anxiety, it can be emotional, it can be physical, it can be work related, whatever kind of stress, can also cause sexual dysfunction. And then medical problems. We talk about the fact that there are organic or physical causes of sexual dysfunction, and then, of course, there are psychological ones. Some of the common medical problems: diabetes mellitus, cardiac diseases, hypertension, if someone's spinal cord has been severed, or even sexually transmitted infections. And one of the last one on this list is when people are on some kind of medication or the side effects of medication. So there are a number of antihypertensives, so people who are using blood pressure medication. Actually, there are some that are notorious, that especially in the man, that can cause uh, sexual dysfunction. So moving on, there are some common types in men and women. So the common ones in the male are what we call erectile dysfunction, or ED, or what is popularly called impotence. And then there's premature ejaculation, and there's delayed or retarded ejaculation. In the females, there's what is called vaginismus, and then there's dyspareunia, and there's anorgasmia or orgasmic failure. Because of my time, I think I would only touch for the male on erectile dysfunction, which is something that I think is common and people know about it, and some may have experienced it at one time or the other. So what is erectile dysfunction, or ED, or impotence, as is commonly known? It's the inability to get and keep an erection firm enough for sexual intercourse. So that's inability to get it up and keep it, strong for sexual intercourse. It may be temporary, or depending on the cause, it may be permanent. And it may be caused by organic, again, like I said before, physical or psychological conditions. And excessive use of maybe sedative drugs, for people who are handling pesticides and other chemicals that are toxic to the human body, or those who drink a lot of alcohol. This is something that, I know even in Christian circles, there is no, should I say, 100% agreement about alcohol. Some say it's okay and some say it's not. But from the medical perspective, if you take a lot of alcohol, it can result in impotence or sexual dysfunction. And of course, the man, will complain of either an absence of sexual desire or failure to obtain an erection, even if there is sexual desire or libido. Recently, I saw someone, a man, whose wife had complained that for months that he hasn't touched her, and these are relatively young couples, so it's not like they are the older couples, and they live together in the same geography. It's not like one has japad and all that. And of course, when they, it was interesting in quote, because it's not the usual situation. You would rather hear of women denying their husband's sexual intercourse, but this one was the opposite. The man was not performing, and when the wife complained, I guess like the video Pastor Ken showed at the initial period, part of what he was telling her is that she should just remove her mind from it and all that, you know. But at the end of the day, when the wife complained and all that, anyway, as difficult as it was, he came and he saw me. And I took him through the explanations, asked a lot of questions, and told him that, well, we need to find if you have any organic basis for this. And I sent him for a blood test, you know, looking for his fasting blood sugar. And I was really shocked when the result came out. It was times 3 the normal. His fasting blood sugar was times 3 above. I'm not even joking, literally times 3 above the normal. So you can see that someone like that, the only presentation he had for a disease called diabetes mellitus was impotence. You know, so there are organic bases for this. I'm still checking. Okay. All right. The slides are back. So just keep going. I think I've gone to like 2 slides. Continue. Yes. So there. Yes. Just I was just here now. So just to show you, of course, for men, this is something you experience, but the left part shows if it is cut, if the penis is cut across, and the right one just shows a side view. So when a penis is flaccid, there's this sponge-like thing inside, what we call corpus cavernosum, or in plural, corpora cavernosa, that fill up with blood when there's sexual arousal, there are nerve impulses, and it allows blood to flow. And once blood flows, you can see the picture below, it fills up with blood, and that is what you see, and there's erection. So if people think there is a bone in there, you are totally wrong. What makes the penis hard or erect is that inflow of blood and causes stiffening. There's no bone there. Next slide, please. So how do we manage this? Again, I'm not trying to make anybody here emergency doctors, you know, but just to give you tips, you know. Of course, for the man, you need to allay fears, encourage the man to be hopeful, like I did with this brother that I was talking about. Again, exercise is good. You know, there's nothing fanciful about being overweight, you know. Exercise as much as you can, even if it's just to walk, you know, good sound sleep, early morning sexual intercourse when testosterone levels are high, because as a man, as those who are listening to me know that at times you wake up with an erection. So if the person is struggling, if you wake up with an erection, then you can engage in sexual intercourse. And of course, the female partner has an important role to play, you know, to cooperate and encourage. Nothing about, you know, saying, what's wrong with you? Aren't you the man I used to know? You know, all those things worsen the situation. And of course, you can go for psychotherapy if it is not a physical or organic thing. And then if there's any diagnosis like this brother that I told you about, he has diabetes, he's currently on drugs, he's been repeating these tests and he's been coming down, you know, so the person can then be managed and further treated. Next slide, please. Okay, like I said, there are oral medications to use. I mean, most of us know the blue pill, you know, Viagra, but again, it's all those things also work on blood issues. Viagra will not cause you to have libido. It will help in the, you know, easing of blood vessels and letting it flow. There are also self-injections can be used to the base of the penis to ensure that blood can flow. There are urethral suppositories. There's testosterone replacement. All these are more medical management, but just to let people know that there is medical help for it. There's also penis pumps, you know, put a pump there, create negative vacuum, put like a ring at the base to ensure that, you know, the penis stays erect. And of course, at the end of the day, can actually have some surgical devices put there, which you can then pump and use. So erectile dysfunction is not like a sexual death sentence. There are so many things medical interventions can do. Next slide, please. Okay, one I'll quickly talk about is, and it's also a common problem, is premature ejaculation. And it's just quick ejaculation faster than can be explained by the human sexual response cycle. If you remember, starting from desire or libido to arousal to plateau to orgasm and then resolution. So if someone goes through that quickly, then we talk about something very quick and usually and most times the erection may be strong, so it's not even a part of that the person is impotent, but ejaculation takes place either before or immediately after penetration, and of course this can lead to sexual frustration, especially on the woman's part, and even the man feeling that I can't satisfy my sexual partner, and it can be a vicious cycle because the next time he wants to try, there's anxiety that will I ejaculate before, and things like that. So it can be an issue. Next slide, please. So we can there are also ways of managing this. So again, rule out any organic basis. If the person has some certain sexually transmitted infections or there is any form of injury, this can lead to it. And then there's training, pause, squeeze technique, pelvic floor exercises, of course, use of condoms, to decrease sensation. There are some condoms that actually contain some anesthetic agents so that the person actually doesn't really feel as much. You can use anesthetic ointment, so that it delays that sensation. And there are some drugs that can be done, and of course, counseling. Next slide, please. Okay, let's quickly move to the woman. Vaginismus is a condition where the vagina has contractions, and render it tight or difficult or impossible to penetrate. It actually happens, maybe rare, but it actually happens. And of course, they will present with the fact that, oh, we tried to have sex and the man just could not penetrate, or it was so painful, or there's also bleeding, and of course, if it's so severe, they would then just avoid sexual intercourse entirely. But of course, you can have some kind of foreplay and can lead to orgasm without penetration. If you remember, I said that, sexual fulfillment doesn't have to go through those 5 stages, and people can have some kind of sexual satisfaction without penetration. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of management, they use dilators, there's psychotherapy, and show that the woman is relaxed enough, and all that, she can use her finger and begin to stretch. And there's also what is called Kegel exercises, as exercising the pelvic floor muscles, So next slide again, like I said, there's no point in dwelling much on this since this is not a medical conference. Dyspareunia just means that there is pain, genital pain with sexual activity. Usually occurs with penetration, but again can occur with non-penetrative digital genital stimulation. And the pain can be superficial or deep. And again, the negative consequence is that once there's repeated pain, there's that, avoidance. And after some time, it's like, I'm just not aroused, I'm just not interested. Next slide, please. So, in terms of how to manage this, again, we need to look at why is the woman having pain. Is there sexual infection? Is there injury? Is there, the worst cases like cervical cancer, or, so many things that, again, you have to rule out, anything physical that can be causing the pain. And of course, if it's a psychological thing, then a sex therapist or a psychotherapist should be able to sort out the woman. Next slide, please. Now, menopause, I'm saying it here because it's not a sexual dysfunction by definition, but I just thought it's important enough so that if there are women here who are in their late 40s, already in their 50s, that have now menopause, there are certain things around menopause that you need to know and your partner needs to know so that you can, adjust to that transition. of course, as by definition, is a permanent cessation or termination of menstruation. Um, of course, after 1 year, because for those who are menopause, it just doesn't stop. You have the perimenopausal or climacteric, you can go for a few months back and all that. Happens in the 40s or 50s. Yeah, in months leading to it, you can have irregular periods, vaginal dryness, hot flushes or hot flashes. Woman just keeps sweating and all that. These are signs that you are nearing the end of your reproductive cycle. Next slide, please. So the issue is, even what happens is there are hormonal shifts. So estrogen begins to drop, and at times this can bring physical changes, slowing down of sexual responses, and the woman reduces sexual activity, but in some women, there is a reawakening, because if you remember, one of the reasons I said for sexual dysfunction is fear of getting pregnant. So when the woman knows that there's just no way that she will get pregnant once she's menopaused, for them, there's that relaxation and actually a reawakening. And of course, there are certain medical conditions that happen after menopause. But one of the most common symptoms women experience is vaginal dryness, because estrogen is reduced, the hormones are reduced, there's dryness, there's reduction in elasticity, there can be discomfort, and even slight bleeding. So next slide, just to see what can be done. Next slide, please. So, of course, you can use water-based vaginal woman may actually need vaginal estrogen, if they need to relieve the dryness, but obviously that is not an over-the-counter thing. Next slide, please. Okay, so haven't talked about what is normal through human sexual response cycle. What is abnormal? I only picked a few in men and women. One of the modules or the topics in this module of intimacy is the issue of how often should couples have sexual intercourse, or frequency. Now, a number of studies have been done, and when you do studies, as for those who do research, know that after some time you aggregate numbers, and we call that average. So when you present your study, you now say averagely people have this, and of course there are the outliers. So there will be a few percentage that will not be part of that average. So most researches concerning the issue of frequency or how often, they try, when it comes to this sexual intercourse, they try to refrain from just talking about average numbers, because people are individuals, and what works for me, what happens to me, even though we are the same human beings, we have the same anatomy and all that, may not work for you. So it's difficult to just talk about an average, But again, looking at the second bullet point, you also have some factors to consider. So, for example, what are the ages of the couple? Generally, younger couples have more sexual intercourse by the fact that they are young, their testosterone, everything is, still there. But as they grow older in age, the frequency naturally reduces. So how are you going to account for that? Because if you ask, for those who are into research, or if you're a scientist, your respondents are also very important. In epidemiology, we talk about, taking care of what we call confounding variables. So if you do a study and all your respondents are above 60 or above 70, and they are telling you, and we do once in 3 months or once in 6 months, and then you publish your study and say the ideal is once in 3 months or once in 6 months. Have you accounted for that variable that these are just aged or older couples. Because if you do that same study in those couples in their 20s or 30s, then you realize that the numbers increase. So the other question is, are you raising small children in cramped quarters? In our palace in Nigeria, we say, are you living in a face me, I face you, where there are children, there are anything. So how do you even have the opportunities to have sexual intercourse when there are so many people around? you know okay. And then, do you enjoy bedroom privacy, again related to this kind of cramped situations, where you're either living with other people or you're sharing rooms with, it's just, there are so many reasons. Does the husband have some very pressurized job, that is really taking a toll on him? Or does the husband have this very manual job, that once he's come home is just exhausted? Does the wife also work? Like it's something that is happening to modern day women. They work and they are still, maintaining the home. They are cooking, they are keeping the house, they are looking after the children, they are also working. And all these things affect your, desire, libido, and all that. Then do they come from loving homes? You can grow up in a home where there's so much strife between husband and father, mother, between siblings, and all that, that somehow just affects your relationship when you get married. And then, of course, are they even happy? When the couple is not happy, the last thing they will want to do is just to be engaging in sex. So I'm saying all these things to say that, there is no ideal to say, like, okay, like this last bullet point that I wrote, some survey results have shown that, the average frequency is 2 to 3 times a week. Again, like I said, you have to know the ages and the conditions of your respondents. So if you look at the second bullet, account for all those things. But this survey shows 2 to 3 times a week. But then there's also surveys that are then specific for respondents who are like into business and very high demanding jobs, and their average was once a week. So, brothers and sisters, brethren, there is no medically prescribed frequency. What works for couple A may not work for couple B. So, and again, like I said, even with age. So, if I use my example, the frequency was very high in my earlier years of marriage. In fact, I used to tell my wife, my second name was Ever Ready Battery, just anything, I'm ready. But it's been a number of years, I don't see it again, because as you are growing old, everything is reducing. There's no point in fighting. But those who watch football, in fact, I think nowadays, if you are 30 years old, it's like you are an old man when it comes to football context. So again, people like JJ Okocha, Kanu Wako, that used to run around the field 90 minutes non-stop, as old as they are now, they cannot do that anymore. So again, we should just relax in the fact that there is no ideal. So you don't put yourself under pressure. You don't then, First Corinthians 10:12 talks about comparing ourselves amongst others is not wise. So if you have friends and they say, my husband, in fact, almost every day of the week, and then you will look at yourself and say, me, that I can only do once in 2 weeks or something. People are different. There are different conditions and different situations. Next slide, please. So again, just like I was saying, bottom line is whatever rate of frequency brings enjoyment and fulfillment to the two of you is what is average for you. Remember, we're talking about that human sexual response cycle. So from desire all the way to orgasm to resolution. Whatever frequency that gives you all that fulfillment and enjoyment is average for you. And again, I don't know about you, but in my own over 30 years of marriage, I have never kept score to say, my wife, do you know that in these last 2 months, we've only done, in fact, I'm amazed at the clip Pastor Ken showed at the beginning, how this man took records, in my hair, something times, pretend to be sleeping, something times. In fact, I just don't get it. Maybe it was, is either that thing was real, or of course it was just trying to just bring out something. But I don't know about you, but I wonder whether people are keeping like sexual intercourse diary. I don't know, but I never did that. It's more about, that enjoyment, fulfillment, let it be spontaneous. You can give and share love and enjoy it whenever it occurs. Okay, so next slide, please. We'll move on quickly. I hope I'm doing well with time. So, what are some of the now? I know that this is one topic. I don't know whether Pastor Ken deliberately put it there, but again, oral sex has become something that I think is, I don't know whether to say is on the increase, but again, because of the kind of situation we're in, social media, things are just being hyped. One of these the practices now is the oral sex. And people talk about the fact that it's safer. You don't have to worry about unwanted pregnancies. They talk about the advantages, but there are issues. But first of all, let me clear any misconception. When we are talking about oral sex, we are really talking about two words, fellatio and cunnilingus. Now, because I've heard people say, oh, kissing, or maybe using your mouth on the nipples or the breasts because it's oral, you're using your mouth. No, that doesn't qualify in terms of oral sex. Those things, of course, happen during foreplay. But oral sex are two words, although now, in the kind of world we have, they've added a third word, which I just decided, in the Christian context, is even a no-no. It's called anilingus. People are actually putting their mouth around the anus. So in fellatio, or what is commonly called blowjob, the woman, of course, receives the penis into her mouth and stimulates the glands and all that. And then for the man, a cunnilingus, or again, they call it eating someone out, is where the man actually stimulates the woman with his mouth over her vulva area. Again, I didn't put all the anatomy here, but the external area you see in a woman be down there is called the vulva, because vagina actually is an internal organ. You don't see it, but that area from the clitoris, the labia minora, the labia majora, or the outer lips, and then the vaginal introitus, the entry, all that area is called the vulva. So the man uses his tongue and all that on, and then of course also on the clitoris. But again, some people perform each on each other. So there's what is called this 69ing, or doing 69, which is like they reverse. So your head is the woman's leg and the vice versa. In oral sex can be intimate and enjoyable. However, it does carry certain health risks, which include some sexually transmitted infections. And some of them are chlamydia. Some of you know chlamydia. Gonorrhea seems to be one of the commonest in those days. Herpes, both genital and of course oral herpes or cold sores. Now, let me just quickly clarify that, so that the next time you see someone, maybe someone has malaria and there's depressed immunity and they break out in cold sores, there's that herpes labialis, which is not as a result of sexually transmitted infection, but there's a herpes that is as a result of sexually transmitted infection. And then the human papilloma virus, HPV, which in the recent past, the country introduced the vaccine for teenage girls, and syphilis. So it is not just about the enjoyment alone. There are also, infections, there are health risks to practicing oral sex. And of course, to reduce this risk of infection, you can use protection. So someone can give like the fellatio over a condom. And for the man doing cunnilingus, you can actually use what is called a dental dam. It's just like a square piece of, rubber thing that you can put over there and do that. And of course, for those who don't have access to a dental dam, they can cut up a condom and put it there so that there's some barrier between, the secretions and the mouth. One of the things that may be not exactly agreed in the medical field is also what is called oropharyngeal carcinoma. So some of these things are tracing throat cancers, to oral sex. But again, there needs to be more study to be able to really, but you see, there's that risk of actually developing throat cancer from just practicing oral sex. Next slide, please. So this is a medical aspect. So what does the Bible say? Unfortunately, or should I just say factually, the Bible is completely silent on this subject. Even if you read things like Song of Solomon, it talks about your hand caressing, and all those kind of things. So fingering and all those kind of foreplay is allowed. It's kind of implied, but there is nowhere in the Bible that we actually see a case of where there is oral sex described. And of course, there are a wide variety of opinions. Some accept it, while others object to it, But the truth is, whether you accept it or you object to it, we don't really have any scriptures that either back you up doing it or say abstain from doing it, But some, when they object to it, is more out of, just your prejudice, and they feel it's very unhygienic, or because I'm such a spiritual being, I shouldn't do that. I remember years ago, even in my medical circles, there was one lady we used to train adolescents on these issues. And one day I think she was more the deeper life or very conservative Christian, if you know what I mean, no makeup kind of woman. And so one day we were talking about this oral sex, and she was like, no, 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 this is not scriptural. No, no, no. So I said, show me in the scriptures, and I guess to her shock, she didn't have any scripture. So that's why I said some just have this personal prejudice against it. Talk about hygiene, and truly for those who practice it, before you do it, you need to clean up. Wash that area very well. Wash your mouth, clean your mouth, clean the genitals. Because those things, the mouth, as we know, or maybe you don't know, is the dirtiest part. There are so many bacteria and everything in the mouth. So it's not even some people think the vagina is the dirtiest. No, it isn't. It's actually the mouth. So hygiene needs to be very, very high if you're going to practice that. So the bottom line is, again, each couple must make their own decisions on the matter. Is it something that they would like to engage in? But like I looked at what can guide us. So I looked at scriptures like Hebrews 13:4, talks about marriage is honorable in all, the bed undefiled. So whatever that not being defiled in bed means to a couple, ensure that that is it. Because the worst thing that can happen is when one partner wants it and the other is not comfortable with it, and then there is an issue with it, because it has to be something that is mutually agreed upon. 1 Corinthians 6:12 and 10:23 are scriptures that are similar. It talks about all things are lawful, but not all things are expedient. All things are lawful, and one of them says, I will not be brought under the power of any, and one of them says, not all things edify. So even if it is lawful, it may not be expedient for you. It may not edify you. And again, 1 Corinthians 7:3-4 talks about the fact that my body as a man does not belong to me, it belongs to my wife, and vice versa. So what I do with my body is also important, so that I don't get, the person doesn't feel violated, by the fact that you are making me do what I feel I'm not comfortable with. So again, Like I said, the Bible is completely silent. I can't tell you to say it is wrong, and I can't tell you to say it is right. You have to consider it. You have to look at the principles of not violating your partner. You have to look at the principles of the hygiene and the health risks associated with it and see whether you can actually practice it or have other forms of sexual practices without going through oral sex. Next slide, please. I think I'm doing well with time. I hope so. I'm almost done. So, in terms of abuse, one of the things that even these topics we're sharing, kudos to Pastor Ken and Pastor Tinu for bringing these things out. They are not things that the average church or Christian circle would discuss. And so there's also some kind of abuse, that goes on in the world, but somehow we think in the Christian context, it doesn't happen, but it does happen in some situations. So, but basically, sexual abuse is any psychological and or physical form of abuse which has sexual implications. So it's not just physical alone. And then, if you want to be more technical, if you talk about sexual violence, it's a type of sexual abuse. So an abuse is more encompassing than just sexual violence. And of course, sexual violence is any form of sexual activity that is not consensual. And that's why when you talk about rape or sexual coercion, it is not consensual. Like I said, sexual abuse covers a wide range of behaviors, and it's not just sexual intercourse. It can be images. Nowadays, because of social media, people send what they call nude pictures. Imagine you receiving nude pictures that you are not soliciting for and things like that. It's a form of sexual abuse. It can be physical contact. People have been in maybe crowded situations or in a vehicle, in a bus or in a train, and some man is rubbing behind, or even as blatant as maybe you are in a office setting and you're a woman and a boss, you walk across and he slaps you on your behind. So those are actually some forms of sexual abuse, physical contact. And then verbal, of course, saying some very sexually expletive things to someone, and even non-verbal, the gestures on the face, licking your tongue across your mouth, all sorts of things. These are actually sexual abuse. But you see, if we don't recognize them, these things just go on or just go without abating. Now, if you bring it to the church, there have been abuse scandals. So for example, because the Roman Catholic Church, doesn't accept or allow their priests to get married, there has been a lot of scandals of priests abusing young children or young boys, and all that. Of course, even in Pentecostal settings, there have been abuse allegations which have shaken some major ministries and mega churches, and even marriages between committed Christians. I once heard of one that the man just wanted anal sex, and if it is not consensual, and mind you, this is between Christians, and if it is not consensual, and I mean, for me, anal sex is even a no-no. I mean, even all the way from um, the Old Testament, sodomy was something that was prohibited against in the laws of Moses. Even Sodom and Gomorrah was basically, destroyed because of their practices of sodomy, you know. But the basic thing is that sexual abuse is never right in any context, Christian or not Christian, and medical help should be sought. Counseling should be sought for the victims because there's so much, fear, guilt, all sorts of nightmare, post-traumatic stress, all sorts of things, psychological disorders that happen as a result of this sexual abuse. And Christians not exempted. So if you are abused, even though you are Christian, it doesn't absolve you from suffering those consequences. And of course, cases should be reported to the appropriate authorities. Unfortunately, somehow because of the stigma and all sorts of things, rape, all those things are not reported, and these are things that, there should be more. I mean, a state like Lagos actually has this domestic and sexual violence kind of, government parastatal that takes care of these things. You report there, they have lawyers who can take the person to court and defend, pro bono and all those kind of things. So these are things that should be done. Next slide, please. So I'll round up with, okay, again, in terms of what are some of the biblical examples of sexual abuse? I'll just run through them. You don't have to open any scriptures. If you look at it from the issue of sexual coercion or violation of sexual rights, Sarai and Hagar, if you remember, she was just co-opted. It was a decision between Abraham and Sarai to say, go in unto my maid, and so that I can receive a child from her. So Hagar had no say in the matter. There was no talk about whether she consented or not. The fact that she was a maid or a slave, she was almost like she had no sexual rights. So to a certain extent, that was some kind of violation of Hagar's rights, sexual rights, or coercion, for her to actually have sex with Oga, as you call it nowadays, the Oga house help syndrome. Rachel and Bilhah, Leah and Zilpah. Now, Bilhah was Rachel's slave or maid. Zilpah was Leah's slave or maid. And when Leah was first having children, so she had Reuben, she had Simeon, she had Levi, she had Judah, and then she left bearing. When she saw that Rachel too now called Bilhah, oh yeah, go to Oga and have children. And so she produced I think Dan and Naphtali, And then when Leah saw that, she also sent Zilpah, go and produce. And then Gad and Asher were born. And then after that, Zilpah now had Issachar and Zebulon. So again, Bilhah's rights, Zilpah's rights were never in question. They were just told, go and sleep with Jacob, and that's it. The second is incest. We know the story of Lot. When Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed, and his wife looked back and turned the pillar of salt, he went with his two daughters, first to the city and then eventually went to the mountains. And those two daughters made him drunk and he slept with both of them. And till tomorrow, Ammon and Moab were born as a result of incest. Again, Reuben and Bilhah. If you remember, after trying to remember the sequence of events. Anyway, Reuben eventually went and slept with Bilhah. So that was like his, in quote, his stepmom or his father's wife. Again, a case of incest. The third category is incest and prostitution. So if you remember Judah left home for some time and then went to where is it now? Is it Moab or some other place? And then had this wife and had these three sons. Of course, most of us remember Onan and the first son. I'm blanking on his name now, but they were so wicked, God slew them. And because in those days there's what was called the levirate marriage. So if you marry if a woman marries a man and he dies, she will be given to the brother, and the first son from that brother is for the the brother that has died. And that's why Onan spilled his seed and didn't want to fulfill that thing, and God, killed him. And the last born, when Tamar realized that, seems as if this woman get witch, or how do we say it in our parlance now, Judah hid this third son, and Tamar then dressed like a prostitute and enticed Judah, slept with him, collected his ring and his staff of office. So it was both incest and prostitution. The fourth category was sexual violence or rape. You remember Shechem, and Dinah. Dinah was the Israel children of Jacob's, his daughter. Actually, she went out to see the daughters of the land, and Shechem, the son of the king, then liked her and raped her. And of course, there were consequences. Simeon and Levi went, told the men of Shechem to all circumcise, and while they were still sore, killed all of them. And then rape and incest. Again, you remember David's first son, Amnon, raped his stepsister, Tamar, sister to Absalom. And again, it was both rape and incest. So these are some of the examples that the Bible brings out about sexual abuse. Next slide, please. So rounding up, what can we do? Next slide, please. Okay, seems as if technology. All right. So what can we do? So in principle, I just thought of all this, of course, we live in a world where temptation abounds, and also for now for married Christian couples. Before we used to think that once someone is married, you are off the chart or off the table. But increasingly, we realize that your whether you are married or not doesn't absolve you from people either tempting you or the married person also, going into extramarital affairs. So even though Psalm 119 verses 9 to 11 talks about, a young man, how will a young man cleanse his way by, staying hitherto into the word. And it says in verse 11, thy word have I hid in my heart that I may not sin against thee. I believe that this applies to everyone. Maybe more to young people, but it applies to us. We need to meditate on the word, memorize, and act on the word so that when those temptations come, it is the word that comes out of us. Like someone says, like toothpaste. If you press it, when toothpaste is under pressure, you press it, it's toothpaste that comes out. So when you are under pressure, temptation to sin, that sexual temptation, what comes out of you is what you have deposited. And then we need to deal with the temptations. Jesus, when he was tempted, every time he said, it is written. So he overcame by the word. And so we also need to overcome these temptations by the word. And then, of course, we need to deal with sin. Let's not sugarcoat it. Let's not say, oh, it's just my weakness. That's how I am. I can't just do but say anything in skirt. No. Romans 6:11 talks about the fact that we are dead to sin. So you need to deal with sin head on. And then, of course, we need to achieve self-control. Like the preachers have said, God is against any form of controlling apart from self-control. And 1 Corinthians 9:24-27, where Paul talks about he's not beating about the bush and all that, he now says that he doesn't want to be a castaway after he has preached to others. So we're talking about, achieving self-control. And then, of course, developing godly character, which is the fruit of the Spirit. So love, joy, peace, gentleness, goodness, temperance, meekness, faith, which there is no, law against. So if we're walking in love, we're walking in joy, we're walking in peace, we're walking in temperance, we're walking in meekness, we're walking in faith, we're walking in goodness, all that fruit of the Spirit, realize that it will help us to stay away from the world that is like just assaulting us with all sorts of sexual temptations. And of course, finally, fasting and prayer. Matthew 6 talks about when you pray, go into your closet. When you fast, don't do it for others to see, anoint your face. In fact, there was once when Jesus was casting out a devil, he actually said that, this type doesn't come out but by prayer and fasting. So if anyone has this challenge, particularly, you can add fasting and praying, fasting to your prayer to overcome. And I think I have one more slide and I'll stop. Next slide, please. Yes, so I got this from a write-up. It says 7 steps to success. It's just trying to, use the word success, but it just says success. So, number 1, you need to bring sexual secrets into the light. So, sin thrives when there's darkness. Sin thrives when there's secrets, Incidentally, my wife and I on Netflix, we watched a film just last night. It's called A Taste of Sin. I recommend it to everybody. Really, really well acted, very balanced in the message, and it was a Ghana thing. Bishop Duncan Williams featured in it, it was really well done. A pastor, got tempted by the lead worship singer. And you could see that even though he was struggling, so if there are struggles from within, you have to bring it up. Even if your wife or your spouse may not be the best person, your pastor, a counselor, someone trusted, bring it out so that once it's out, then it loses that power on you so that that person can hold you accountable, you know. And number two talks about practicing pre-zone choices. Now, in the addiction balance, there's what is called once you are in the zone, it means that you have so slid, it's like you've gone into a slippery slope that you cannot just come out. So, but before the person gets into that, should I say, point of no return, you have to ensure that when those thoughts come, when those things come, fight it. I once many years ago, I have this sister-in-law and a husband who are deeper life people, members, and we once visited, and they didn't live in I was in Lagos then, and they didn't live in Lagos, so we went to Mondo State, and there was a brother who was visiting that night, and he was talking about, how he ran away from all the Pentecostal, he came to deeper life because what happened, he has this issue. Women are always looking at him. When he was saying this, I was just laughing because, when you are not taking responsibility for your actions. But one thing that happened to him, he said one day he was driving and he saw this beautiful lady standing by the roadside. I know in his own words, he said the car just stopped in front of her. Not what he said. He said the car just stopped in front of her. Not that he applied the brakes. And of course, took the woman, went to a hotel room. By morning, the woman had gone. He woke up and the woman had left. And the woman actually used, was it makeup on the wall? I mean, on the mirror. And she now wrote, "Where is now your God?" Hey, he said he started shivering. So my point is this: before you go to that zone, that point of no return, ensure that you begin to tell yourself, when a thought comes, like you say, you can't stop thoughts from flying into your thing, but you can stop them from taking root and then acting out. Like I was talking about that film I watched just yesterday, Taste of Sin. This man was bombarded because he mistakenly entered this worship leader's room when she was taking a bath, saw her nakedness, and he began to torment him. Instead of him to actually bring it to light and practice pre-zone, he now decided he was going to see her in her home. And of course, your imagination is as good as mine. You don't, at that level, you practice Joseph's method. You flee. You don't go and try and prove that I can conquer this Goliath. The third one is to discipline fantasies and sexual surges. Again, it's a mind thing. Do you fantasize? When you see a woman, start fantasizing and everything. In fact, Jesus raised the bar and said that if you look on a woman lustfully, you have already committed in your heart. So there's also heart adultery. It's not just the physical act. So it is something that we have to discipline ourselves. Number 4, walk inside out. So whatever is on your inside, if the word is there, let it come out. So that when you see a situation, confront it with the word. Fill up yourself with the word, so much so that when things happen, you don't. So for example, if you see a woman, and this happened to me when I initially got saved, of course, as a very happening guy, had girls and all that. When I got saved, somehow from within me, now, of course, many years later, I know that it was the Holy Spirit. Anytime I saw beautiful girls, that before I got saved, the instinct is, how do I chase this one? On my inside, I used to just think, is this woman saved? Is this lady saved? And once in my mind, she's not saved, she's not beautiful. That it was such a mentality I developed by the Holy Spirit. So that once you see an opposite sex, instead of following curves and seeing everything, begin to think, is she saved? Can I preach to her? So that way it removes any form of sexual temptations. And number 5, meet non-sexual needs non-sexual. I mean, you can imagine, maybe if you're in business, you just want a big contract, and then the guys are saying, let's go and celebrate, And of course, celebration can mean go to the bar, go and drink yourselves to stupor, or just go and chase women. In fact, I remember in my first year of medical school, we had these major exams, anatomy, physiology, and biochemistry. And as soon as I finished my papers, I traveled to London. Then my older brother was studying law in the UK. And so the call came, that I had passed these exams. And it was incredible. My brother just said, let's go out, let's just go and look for ladies, Mind you, we're not saved, so don't look at it as, but today that my brother is such a senior pastor and redeemed is incredible. So again, it was a non-sexual need. The fact that I passed my major first exam did not mean that I needed any sexual thing to, celebrate. Number 6, quit window shopping. As a man, we don't have to be looking and undressing women, up and down and be looking at so many sisters back and forth. You only need one, and that is your spouse. So quit window shopping. Window shopping means that you actually see it, but you don't either buy it or you touch it. You just look at it. So quit this window shopping, because Jesus said, if you lust after someone in your heart, you've already committed. And finally, practice what is called 3D sexuality, three-dimensional sexuality. Remember, sex is not just physical. It also has to do with the soul and the spirit. So when you are tempted to look at another woman that is not your spouse, or you are looking at it as not your spouse, begin to think, what is their body for? Look at that woman. Maybe she's in a shop. God has endowed her with big front or big behind, and she's shopping, she's taking things. Instead of you to be looking and window shopping, just begin to think, this woman is working hard. She's probably shopping. She's a working hard mom. So that way, it begins to shape your mind away from just looking at that woman or that person through the lens of just sex. Of course, what is the condition of this person's soul? Is this person saved? Is this person emotionally happy? Does she look happy? Is there a word I can talk to her and make her happy? And of course, spiritually, is she saved? Because no matter what happens, the physical beauty is skin deep. It doesn't go beyond the skin. Well, and those things are subject to change. In fact, Proverbs 31 talks about beauty being vain and all that. So all those things are subject to change. So again, if we can ensure that we practice these 7 steps, we can become success, not successful, or successful in our dealings. And I think that's my last slide. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak to this esteemed audience, and I thank Pastor Ken and Pastor Tino for the opportunity. So if there are questions, I'll be happy to address them.
Wow, 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 wow. Thank you, Doc. And thank God that Pastor Bayo is online. I was telling Pastor Bayo about your capabilities in this department. Now he has seen for himself. And indeed, when next you're in Canada, he has already put it in his diary. Whenever you're in Canada, we're going to set you up to talk to us men exclusively, and then find a way for you to talk to all the couples. So thank you so much. I was trying to get your sister to come and take my seat so that she can help respond to it. She said, no, you guys do your thing. Let me just listen. But she sent her warmest regards. There was a question that came in while you were speaking, particularly when you were talking about localizing the cause of sexual dysfunction to isolate the possible organic cause. And this gentleman from the Netherlands, sent in a message and said, we should ask you, okay, that's it. If a man that is diagnosed with diabetes, can he still be fertile to make his wife pregnant?
Okay, yes. So I actually gave you an example that happened to me just early this month. The issue about diabetes is it affects the erectile function. So impotence is not the same thing as being sterile. If I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, the fact
Mm,
that someone cannot achieve an erection long enough to have sexual intercourse
mm,
doesn't mean the person doesn't have sperms that can um, make a woman pregnant. But of course, we know that the process is to have an erection, go through the sexual response cycle, and have an orgasm or an ejaculate.
mm,
So the issue is, except of course, they coexist,
mm.
if you understand what I mean. But the fact that you have diabetes doesn't mean you become oligospermic or exospermic, meaning that you have low sperm count or no sperm count. What diabetes does is it affects the blood vessels. And I just showed briefly that for erection to happen, there are nerve impulses that speak to your brain, and everything goes down there and allows blood to fill up those sponge-like thing inside the penis, and then there's erection. Now, if the blood vessels are affected, which diabetes does, then there is that inability to have an erection, but it has nothing to do with that you have.
Yeah, what I hear you saying is that there is water in the overhead tank, but the
Exactly.
pipe into the house to bring the water to the kitchen where the woman will drink it and use it to cook, the pipe is broken. In your in
Exactly.
your own medical, is there any way to use bucket to go and fetch the water and bring it to her?
Of course. I mean, number one, if the diabetes can be controlled. I mean, again, not without going into too much details, there's type 1 and there's type 2. Type 1 means that the person cannot produce insulin, and so they have to be going on insulin injections. Type 2 is that the pancreas is overwhelmed with so much sugar or glucose, they can't bring it down, or there's what we call resistance. Anyway, so if it's something like type 2 or even type 1, once the blood glucose starts coming down, it can be reversed. Hopefully, if it is not been there for extended period and if there's nerval damage and all that, so it can be reversed. One, two, if it is not, like I did show, there are many things. You can use a pump, you can use surgical implants, and three, they can actually harvest the sperm. There's what is called this ICSI, intracytoplasm, whatever, injections to actually harvest the sperm cells. So there's medical intervention. So if, I don't know if I'm overflogging it, but just to allay.
No, no, no. You have not overflogged it. As a matter of fact, that last part is the one I was really praying it's available. That so you can use bucket to go and fetch the water from the tank. We can harvest
Exactly,
it because his main goal is how do you get your wife pregnant?
of
And
course.
if they can't enjoy the sexual stimulations that come with a good erection, they can still get pregnant, by adopting one of these options that you have mentioned. Um,
Yes, definitely.
then again,
Definitely.
you said something about the beauty of the early morning intercourse because that is when the man would have had a good level of testosterone. You know, maybe the emotional part or the psychological part to this whole component is what I now want to ask you. What do you do when, like the video we showed you, the woman is wondering, this early morning, is that what's on your mind? When you should be thinking about interceding for souls, knotting your tie to go and hustle for business. How can you be waking me up this morning? How can you help us in that regard?
Well, again, I think I will push it back to your when you started out. If there is communication, it is key.
Mhm.
Communication is key because the woman needs to understand that. And let me confess, this happened to me in my very early days of marriage. My wife didn't understand. Her own mentality was, once she saw an erection, it means that I wanted to have sex. So I kind of educated her to say, as men, we have this, they call it, is it morning wood or whatever, that it doesn't mean, and of course, it's almost like it's, it was to my undoing as it were, because every time she saw it, it was like, my husband wants me, and was ready, But going back to the question, it's really communication. First, you understand that some men wake up with an erection. It doesn't mean they are sexually motivated. They just wake up with an erection. One. Two, some men or even human beings are more morning person than night. So again, early morning sex is something that some even enjoy more than it has to be night. And then who says it has to be at night? Then three, once there's that understanding, I think, the woman needs to be accommodating, and not use this strap line, actually try and make the man feel guilty. Is that all you are thinking about? Souls are dying, souls are perishing. The fact that I make love to you or don't make love to you doesn't mean souls will not die. So, sister, just forget that one. That one act will not prevent souls from dying or souls from getting saved. So I think the principle is understanding and communication. And again, if we flip it over to the man's side, how much of foreplay, how much of ensuring that the woman is pleasured? Because at times when I begin to hear all these, they're genuine. If a woman is tired, she has a headache, she's ill, she's had stress at work, it's more mental for women than us men that, it can even be a stress reliever. You have been so tired, you just see your woman and it's like, oh, come on to me, all you that are labor, and I will give you desire. So there are genuine times that the woman, but you see, if my principle is simple, if the woman also enjoys the sexual intercourse, then the excuses of, is that all that is, or my souls are dying, go and preach, will be reduced, because you know that I'm also going to enjoy it, and then it will also stop this sex as a weapon, that there are women are wont to do, and finances as a weapon as men are wont to do. Once there is that communication, there's that understanding, there is mutual pleasure, then it's very unlikely. I'm not saying it cannot happen. But it's very unlikely that those will be the I don't want to do. So make him feel guilty that souls are dying, they're not spiritual enough, and all those kind of things.
Thank you so much, Doc. Please, you guys, if you have your heart-pressing questions, type them out now. While appreciating everybody who has taken time to join this particular meeting, I want to especially appreciate our senior pastor here, Pastor Bayo Awuleri, for joining us. Pastor Ike Monye, all the way from Temple of Glory in Abuja, thank you for joining us. Pastor Felix Idahosa from the Netherlands, thank you so much for joining us. And our dear, wonderful pillar trustee, Dr. Dave Odigie, thank you for joining us. We also have Fred Zamani and my inherited friend from my wife, Brother Tomide Olukwade is with us, and Emmanuel Rotiba. So glad to have you guys. And yes, Dr. Abimbola Adetola from New Jersey, thank you so much for joining us. All right, I think it's been a phenomenal session, like my wife said. But before you go, I have this last question. The average Christian thinks it is holiness to label sex, even in marriage, as a dirty thing. Therefore, they can brag on how long they have gone without sex. Can you give us a little bit of an expansion on the beauty and the holiness of sex? Is God present when we are having sex, or does the Holy Ghost leave us for a season?
That's a good question. There are many misconceptions about sex. If it were that itself can be a full presentation, just to talk about those misconceptions. The first thing people forget is that God created sex. He could have, I mean, now that with my knowledge of medicine, he could have made us like some animals, hermaphrodites. You have both male and female in you, and you just reproduce by yourself without any pleasure. But God, in his wisdom, and mind you, Adam did not realize he was alone. It was God that identified that it was not good for him to be alone. And so he made this woman, brought out of his rib, so that Adam would not think if he made from dust, this is another person entirely. But because he was so brilliant and he had the Spirit of God in him, he woke up from post-op sleep. I don't know whether he had pain in his side, saying, post-op, someone has been taken out of me. But he saw the woman and prophesied, and God obviously put that instinct, because Adam and Eve never faced babyhood, childhood, adolescent. They were created adults, so they already had the instincts. Because I think is it Genesis 4 verse 1 that says, and Adam knew his wife. So there's that instinct. So God created sex, and if God created sex, how dare you, if I can put it that way, call what, remember was it Acts chapter 10? Yes. When Peter saw that vision of unclean things coming down, and they said, no, Lord, I cannot say anything that is unclean. And God says, don't call what I have cleansed unclean. So it's almost like I can say, how dare you? God created something, it was good, he instituted it, and then he added jala, he added pleasure. He couldn't have, he needn't have added pleasure. It would have just been a chore to say, you need to reproduce, to, like I said, go and populate the earth, you have dominion and all that. But he added pleasure. So this is the Lord's doing, like the scripture says, and it is marvelous in our eyes. So how dare you call what God created, he called it holy in the context of marriage, and you say it's dirty. But again, I understand that people are socialized differently. So some mothers, in a bid to, restrict their daughters, they say that thing is dirty. Don't even, So because usually it's more feminine than male. If I don't know who asked the question, but it's more of the woman that thinks this thing is dirty. And then Hebrews 13:4, as we know, says, the marriage is honorable in all, the bed undefiled. So we are talking about bed issues within a marriage context. Jesus said, and the twain shall become one flesh. That oneness includes sexual intimacy. Song of Solomon is rife about my love. Proverbs 5, I think verse 19 says, let her beauty, let her breasts satisfy you at all. So, I don't, like I said, the only reason I can readily think of is that person was socialized so that it will be a deterrent to sex, to say sex is dirty. And of course, anything you associate with dirt. But there is nothing holy. In fact, you are unholy because 1 Corinthians 7 talks about rendering your due benevolence to your wife. So if you restrain or restrict or refrain from performing your duties, you are actually insane. And like you said, have you ever thought of it this way? Holy Spirit, when you are making love, is closing his eye. He's there in the midst. Jesus said, lo, I am with you always. Always, like KJV would say. So whether you're having sex with your wife or not, he's there with you. He's present. So, I don't think I can say it as more clear or hard terms.
I think you've put it so succinctly. It is a sin for you to say this thing is dirty, because the Almighty, who is holy, is the one who has created it, and he added the salt of making it pleasurable. He could have just made it a blank experience or chore, but he wanted us to be able to enjoy it. Thank you so much. If we were on Zoom, this would have been the time I hand over to Dr. Dave Odige, because he's one of the best recapitulators that we have. So once again, I appreciate everybody who has taken time to join. Please say kind words to Dr. Tunde Shegun, wherever you are, whether from Facebook, the YouTube, or those of you on Instagram. I can bet monitor a few places alternatively. And thank you, James Lord, for joining, and every one of you, Samson and Molari. So good to have you guys. I'm so glad that you could make it together. It's always a joy for me when husband and wife join marriage teachings together so that they can adjust the engine of what's happening in their marriage at the same time, together. If one person is informed, empowered, and enlightened, but the other is not, there's a bit of a drag. So I celebrate you two coming on together. All right, Doc, I know it's night time on your side. Ibidu, if there's any question, could you copy and paste for us? I'm checking from my own side here. Greetings from Pastor Ike Unamdi, that's from the USA. So they appreciate the teaching. Thank you, Samui, Lady Ui. And okay, I have to change from here to there. Okay, Doc, we are super grateful. Thank you so much. That's from my wife. Thank you from James Lord. So Doc, we are so grateful. But like Oliver Twist, we shall ask for more. I think I wanted to challenge you on something, but you've already cleared it. The predominance of incest nowadays. And so you were talking about Jacob, Abraham, and Sarai, and the relationships with their maids and all of that. I was going to say that legally speaking, in those particular times, in that dispensation, slaves were considered as chattels, as properties of the owner. So they didn't have their independent right, both in labor, to choose some of those things for themselves. And then a sharp distinction between that and what's going on today, house girl syndrome. It were the wives that suggested those ones. So wives were in the picture. So it's totally different from when men sneak out with the girlfriend or house girl without the knowledge of the man. I know that in some cases, very rare cases in Nigeria, people bring in house helps for surrogate whatever, and they are not designated as house help. They sort of cover them up, but everybody will eventually, those close will know that the children in the house came from that auntie that is called house girl, but she's actually the mother of the children in the house. We thank you so much. Remember, when you're in Canada again, you owe us at the Center of Life Church, and then I'm going to make sure you owe me. You owe me a second. I was going to say second round, but my wife is there. She may rebuke me for using that word. But second session, okay, I think that's more holy for her. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. Tinazo says, thank you, Dr. Tunde. This is quite informative. It really is. And with your permission, can I send the PowerPoint that you used for us today? Can I send it to those who want it so that they can review what you've taught? I have your permission to do that. All right, sir. Sure. Thank you so much. So you have it from the author. If you need the document or the PowerPoints, the slides today, just reach out to me and I'll forward it to you. With Jesus, joy, man of God, we thank you. Thank you for being such a great blessing. Please give our love to my sister with you. And may the Lord recharge your battery. May he restore your status as ever ready battery. That was a tease. That was not a real thing. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good night rest.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Remember, every Saturday, we deal with these 4 pillars of relationships: the friendship, the communication, intimacy, and building a future together. This is our third round, our third module on this particular subject of intimacy. If you go to my YouTube channel, Kennedy Asegime, you'll find all the other modules that have been taught. And next week, Saturday, we are going to be dealing with building a future together. When two people understand where they are going, there are changes in life, which is usually to catch up with where they are going. There are changes to be far more synchronized. So you don't just love a person for where they are coming from or for where they are right now. You love them for where they are going. And it helps you to understand why they are doing what they are doing the way they are doing it. And once that happens, our love lives will just go to another level. What can you do to bring your partner into that open knowledge of why you are the way you are right now, in anticipation where you are preparing to get to? And in the new week, we'll start again on another circle of modules to talk about friendship again, communication again, intimacy again, and so on and so forth. Until we come your way again, which is next Saturday, please have a beautiful, beautiful weekend. And for the men that can, tomorrow is our altars in the valley. Somebody teased me this week and said, Pastor Ken, you are becoming cry pastor. So I've promised myself already. Tomorrow, I beg the Spirit of God, don't move me into that tear time, but I just want you to know I am a human being just like you. I go through the trials like you go through, but guess what? Altars in the Valley is a place where we are helping each other to understand that no matter what you are going through, don't lose out on your altar. Find God even through that particular situation. Wow. That reminds me, I think about 19 years ago or 20 years ago, Pastor Ike Money of Temple of Glory, gave me a book, and it talks about finding God in that difficult situation instead of just looking for a way out. Yeah, there's actually a book like that. He gave me that book and I read it thoroughly. God bless you all. I'll see you again tomorrow for Altars in the Valley. And for those of you that want to support us in prayer, support us even in substance. Our PayPal channel is Faith and Family LI Leadership Institute at gmail.com. For e-transfers, for those in Canada, you can use one number, ken@65 at gmail.com. And for those in Nigeria, the GT Bank access is 01686227761. If you play back this video, whether on YouTube or on Facebook, you'll see this information again. May I invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like what you have watched, and share with other people. Don't hoard the truth, but share the truth. God bless you. Bye-bye.
...2024 is the year of following divine patterns for progress, advancement, and victory in your family life. Friends, I'm telling you, this is not the year to build your marriage on the premise of what is in the newspapers, on the premise of what's happening in the social media or what is trending. No. This is the year that you are going to intentionally set filters around your marriage, around your love life, around your family, around everything that pertains to the legacy of your home and your family name. Filters that will keep out what is trending, filters that will keep you safe from what is trending, filters that will make you, an heir of God, not an heir of your environment, an heir of God, not an heir of the circumstances in your city. "2024 is the year of following divine patterns for progress, advancement, and victory in your family life." Friends, I'm telling you, this is not the year to build your marriage on the premise of what is in the newspapers, on the premise of what's happening in the social media or what is trending. No. This is the year that you are going to intentionally set filters around your marriage, around your love life, around your family, around everything that pertains to the legacy of your home and your family name. Filters that will keep out what is trending, filters that will keep you safe from what is trending, filters that will make you, an heir of God, not an heir of your environment, an heir of God, not an heir of the circumstances in your city.